We'll talk about the UV map here just a little bit, then get into a little bit more detail later on. As you see, the delete UVs is grayed out. It's because this mesh here has no UVs. When we're sculpturing on this 3D mesh, we really don't need no UVs. So when would we need UVs? Is when we are completely done and happy with our sculpturing, and we want to, let's say, use the projection master to apply some texture on here. Now we could use poly painting, but if we're going to use a regular texture type with an image, we would need UVs. And if we come down to the texture map, basically what UVs do when you set them up is when this 2D image will be applied to this 3D image, and this will determine how this 2D image will be applied to this new type of UVs when I make some. If it's improper UVs, things might not work correctly. As example, if I was to had some bad UVs on here and I was using the projection master and I drew out a nice star in the forehead and I projected it, well, it might shift over to the left or over to the right. So we need to have proper UVs. And once again, once you set up your UVs, it's probably best not to go back in and try sculpturing it, because you could mess up your UVs. So what are UVs a little bit more in depth? Well, let's go ahead and load up this little plug-in here. I'll move it to the side here, and we got this UV master. And if you really want to know what UVs are and you're having a hard time understanding it, well, it's really simple, and you really don't have to. This will make everything so simple for you. It's almost does it by itself, and you don't have to do a whole lot to get good results. The first thing we will do is press on Work on Clone, but before I do that, just wanted to show you a few things. Is this head here has subtools, and it has some eyes for the subtools. These get ignored. The only thing that we're going to assign UVs are to the head. It also has subdivision levels. This is not important to understand about this part, but it will move the subdivision level to the lowest one when I press Work on Clone. And I know when I'm using the UV master, if I have this texture on right here, it likes to turn it on and off when I mess with it, so I'm just going to turn it off right now. So when I come over here and I'm going to press Work on Clone, it will remove the eyes and it will go to the lowest subdivision level. And also, if we look down here, we have this new tool. It has the word CL in front of it. This is the clone one here. And I'm going to give you the basic 1, 2, 3 step, and you're done, because you really don't have to understand none of this. But this is basically unwrap, give it a few seconds, you'll have a progress bar that comes up the top here. When that happens, you'll be able to flatten this out to look at your new UVs here, and that's kind of how it looks flattened. Then unflatten it here. Then we have this check seam here. This, you can see where the seams are at. We'll go on that a little bit. So basically, let's say it set up some UVs for us already. We could actually see how the UVs look. I mean, we come down here to the texture right now, and you can find these checker patterns all over the internet. And when we apply this, what we're looking for is we're looking for nice, even squares, and everything's kind of uniform. This makes the texture apply good. But we have some seams right here where everything's kind of not matching up, so we'll just leave that be for right now. And like I said, basically you're done. So when you're done right here, you could press copy UVs here, and we're going to copy this. Then we're going to switch to our new head. To prove it, this one does not have no UVs. If I try enabling this on this one here, it's going to tell me texture mapping requires UV mapping. It has no UVs. So since we copied that one and paste the UVs, and there it is. So now I want to fix this seam here, so I'll select the clone one back here. And let's move all this up to the top. So go ahead and flatten this one more time. And flatten that. Now we're going to check the seams here. Typically, we would not want to have seams in the front. We would typically want to have seams where we can't see them, and that's usually on the back side. What we can do is we can enable this painting control, and when we do this, we have the protect, and I can protect in this area, which will be red. And let me scroll up here a little bit more here. And we can press attract. This will attract where we want the seams at, but if right now if I just want to just do the protect here in this area, well, it'll try find another route to mix more seams here without in the front. And there's our new one here. So let's go ahead and flatten that one out. Let me go ahead and spin that around just a little bit better, and so you can kind of see this a little bit better. There you go. F on the keyboard to frame that up, then we can flatten it out. Then we got some new UVs there, and unflatten it. Now, when you are testing it with this checker pattern on, you're going to get your true results when it is not flattened out. So this is basically how you're going to see it with the texture, and it looks really good like that. And you can see the front, no seams, and the back's got the little seam, and it's very noticeable. Not that noticeable, I meant. So basically what I'm saying is when you flatten it out, it's still going to look kind of good right here. Give me a second. As you, I'll turn off the wireframe here, and it's all evened out, but really the true results are when it's back to the original shape. They're all nice and even, and they're all kind of nice and uniform. I had paused the video and got a new head up here, so if I press protect, normally all the colors would come back from what I started with, but they're not since this is a new project. And press protect, and there's all types of methods you can do. This is one that I like using. I want to protect everything, so I'm going to the color and fill object. Now everything's protected. Now I usually go in the second step to press attract, where I want the seams to be attracted to, and usually these are on the back side. And I come somewhere in the halfway mark here, right in the y-axis, and just kind of paint generating this area right here. Doesn't have to be perfect. And if I want to erase any of the color, you can see we have the erase. You can erase whatever you want. Control Z that. And if we're happy with that, we're going to press unwrap, and we're going to turn on the check seam to see where that seam was at, where it created a new seam, and right there it created it, and right where I wanted it. Once again, we'll flatten that to take a look at it, and unflatten it. See, anytime that I turn on this protect or attract, it brings the original colors back. So and let's take a look here with texture on it here. All we're looking at is the checker pattern. It has some pretty even spacing and between the checker patterns. They're not too stretched out, and this looks good enough for this right here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you can see it's nicely uniformed, and it's got some fairly decent spacing between the checker patterns. And we have this option, track from Ambient Occlusion. So when we select this right here, we'll start getting some blue areas where it's going to attract, and it'll try attracting in the blue area. If the area that's not protected, it still could try creating a seam in the white area because it's not protected. So if we need to protect it, we need to protect it now before we unwrap it. Typically this seems to work pretty good. Just press the Ambient Occlusion and just unwrap that. Even though that it will create a seam right here where it wasn't protected, my main concern is how this texture is going to look on the dog. Alright, I'm not really particular how I want my seams on this little demonstration, how they're laid out, but I want to make sure my UVs are looking real good, and that's all that's going to matter to me, and I'm happy with that. In this next step, I'm going to be painting density up on the face of this dog here, and I can increase the density or decrease it. And basically what this will be doing is giving this more texture room up here where I'll be adding. What's good about this is because the more texture area you have, the more color information on the pixels it can handle, and things will look a lot cleaner when you paint your colors on here, and they will hold a lot more information. So that said, we'll just turn off the texture here. We're just going to do a little comparison here. Then we have the density option right here, and before I select this, I want to keep the existing UVs that I got here, the seams, and we'll check that. Then we'll press the density here, and we have this little button here that says ×2, and whatever this slider is, it'll ×2 it. We have some preset buttons down here, or we can move the slider here and press ×2. Then you can see that the icon changes to the slash right there. So, or I can press right here. So I'll just press it right there, and I'm going to paint in this general area right here, and I'm going to unwrap it. Then when we look at this area right here where the texture is on, you can see that the numbers gotten smaller there. Now if we turn this back on, we're going to erase some of this. If we switch this to number 1 for this example, we can kind of start erasing it. Let's set it to this one right here. This is for the 1/3. And we'll unwrap that. And we'll turn texture on. And you can see a big drastic change there. So the next step, I'll be going over polygroups, and I'll select this right here. And if we turn on the polyframes, you can see that this mesh has polygroups. So if I Control key, Shift key, click here, basically what this groups is that when it's on right here, it's going to put a seam where the groups are different from one another. It'll try putting a seam all the way around the opening holes right here, and wherever the two groups meet together. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and leave the symmetry on. This will make the UV ions symmetrical, so we'll unwrap this. And give it a second. We'll turn off polyframes. I did a fairly decent job, but up in here in the head and the throat, that's not where I wanted to seam, so we'd have to go back and enable painting to fix that. But as far as the rest of the mesh, it did a fairly decent job. And if we flatten this out, As you can see, this is what we call a UV island. They're all separate pieces, and that's why I left the symmetry on to make the UV islands symmetrical. We had the check seam. We knew what that was. That checks where the seam's at. And basically, if we want to save this, we can. This allows us to save the control painting map. So basically, what's going to save? It's going to save all this color map stuff right here. And we'll save this and also save this tool also. And we can also load that map. If we wish to clear the map, we can just press clear here. And when I turn on the protect here, you can see it didn't bring back none of that original colors that I painted with. In this next step here, I'm still going to go over the polygroups here, because sometimes when you're using the UV masters and you're trying to place a seam where you want it, it may not go there. And polygrouping, it will help force it to go in that area. As you can see here, I robbed the vest off the demo soldier, and if I hold the shift key and snap it directly in one axis, and you can see the y-axis here, the green one, is the halfway mark from the left side to the right side. And this is where I want to start my seam at, because typically if you're thinking about, well, where do I place my seam at? Well, just think of it as a shirt. Where do they put the seam in a shirt when they sew a shirt together? Well, they put it in the halfway mark right here, and that's where they sew it at. So we'll keep that in mind. Now, if I was using doing a seam on the head, I might not want to have that many seams. But for this type of mesh, yeah, I would want something like what I got here. So with that said, we'll just press work on clone for right now, and our polygroups is on, so we can force this, and we're going to unwrap it. Let's check the seam here and turn off polyframes, and it's forced the seam in the area where I wanted it at. And we'll flatten that out, and you can see our UV island. Let's take a look at that with the texture on here. And that looks pretty good. And just one little note is, every time that you do some changes, you always got to unwrap it, and your last finishing up before you walk out of here is to copy the UV, select your new tool, and paste it. Make sure that you do that. This is delete UVs. Basically what this does, it deletes them. I will not select that because some of these settings will not apply when I don't have no UVs. So we're just going to leave that alone. That's what it does. It deletes UVs. The Morph UV morphs the UVs here. As you can see where I had seamed it earlier, it morphs it out. You know, morphs it flat and morphs it back to the original shape. We have the UV map size, the slider here. Basically, if I move the slider somewhere, let's type in the number 3000, and we'll just tab get out of that. And we got them down to the texture map down here, and we create a new texture. It's going to create one by 3000 by 3000. If we put our cursor over here, you can see the width and height is 3000 by 3000. We have these preset ones right here. We can press 2048, and this one will create one at 2048 by 2048. Press new, and now we have one at 2048 by 2048. Let's switch to a different texture here. This I like using this texture here because it likes to show me where the seam lines are at. And I have this in the back here, and you can see the contrast where when I was morphing it, this is where it breaks apart at. Then we have the UV map border. I've never really messed with this. This is for overpainting. I believe When you're painting this area and you don't want a sharp hard edge right here, then you would adjust that. Personally, I have not messed with it. And we're going to go ahead and switch to a different texture here, like a checker. And we have this UV cylindrical. This applies well, it remaps the texture on the surface as being cylindrical. So if I press this, we'll get this little pop-up. We need to move the geometry down. So this is one thing that you'll run into. So if you want to know about that area, it'll tell you that to lower the subdivision level. So we'll press UV cylindrical, and it mapped it on there cylindrical. Control Z that. And UV planar, if it was if this shape was kind of flat, I would want to use a UV planar type on this. As you can see, it looks pretty good there in front. Side, not so good. The back looks alright there. Then we have the UV spherical. You would want to use this kind of like on round shapes, like an eyeball or something like that, and we'll Control C that. So basically these first three here are kind of like you would probably see in a lot of your other 3D applications. We have the UV tiles here. When we select this, it assigns the texture map for each polygon. We want to see that a little bit better. I'll turn this on here, and it assigns the texture map to each polygon. Be very careful of not using a Morph UV on this, because I've known it to kind of freeze up, so be careful about that. Then we'll go to the pack UV tiles here, or PUV tiles. This is going to assign some different options over here. As you can see, we got the GUV tiles and the AUV tiles. This will assign a mixture of both of these. So I'll select here, and we get something like that. Then I morph it, and we get something like this. So let's just go ahead and morph that back. Then we have for the group UV tiles, if you have different groups on your mesh, this will apply the texture per group. We can select this, take a look, and we'll morph the UVs here, and we get something like this. Now we got the adaptive tiles here, the UV tiles, or the AUV tiles here. When I select this, and we have the ratio set to 1 by default, this will basically work like the UV tiles. When I morph this, it'll assign the textures per polygon. Let me switch this so we can see a little bit better here. But with the settings, we can move the ratio here if we want to adjust that. Let's go ahead and switch to a different texture here. Let's select, well, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and load that other head back up here. This will show up a little bit better. And then we got this repeat H count and the V count. This is one for like horizontal and vertical. It just kind of moves that texture in that direction. And we got the one for the vertical, and we'll bring that back. Now this, I mean, this could come in kind of handy for certain things, but let's just use this one for example here. And since the image here's got some black on the background here, it's showing up transparency here. Got to be very careful with this, because if you're using the projection master with this, and I was to paint a star on the forehead here, and this was cranked up and it projected, I will liable to have more than one star when it's done finished projecting, so keep that in mind. And we'll just go ahead and switch to a different texture here, and we'll go to the next step, and we got the adjust U coordinates here. It's going to adjust the texture offset, so let's look in the back here where the seam's at, so it shows up a little bit. And if I press adjust here, you can see it move just a little bit, so I'll move it quite a bit and adjust it. Now one's for the U and the one's for the V coordinates, so if I move this one and adjust it. And then we have this switch U and V's, which basically swaps them. And for some reason I got to turn this back down to lowest subdivision level, and we'll swap these. Oh, got to press apply, and we'll swap them. Apply and swap them. We got these cycle UVs here. It just cycles through them, and it's more I'm doing here, the more I'm messing it up, which is not good. But then we got the flip U coordinates for horizontal and the vertical. Now I'm going to come back up here to the Morph Uvs here and kind of give you a little demonstration how you might want to use this, because you see me morph UVs and you might say, well, what else can I do with it? Well, if I was trying to paint inside the mouth of this character for some reason, well, that'd be kind of hard to do with the mouth closed. So let's turn on the polyframes here, and we're gonna use the projection master here in a second. Before I do that, we'll morph this out. And the reason why I use this polyframe on is because I can see where the mouth's at. If I turn it off, it's kind of hard to see where the mouth is at. Right here is the mouth, and I'm going to use a projection master and going to paint on a red color and paint inside the mouth. Let me get the color a little deeper here, more color, and we'll project it back on. Now we painted inside the mouth area. So when I come back here, morph it back, you can see the color is inside the mouth, and I got a little bit on the lip, but that's alright. Now you see me go over some of these settings for the map size. Well, the less map size that you have, well, the less color information you'll be able to get on the texture map. The larger, the more information you'll be able to get on the texture map. Another thing is, sometimes just overkilling something by just going full blast, thinking always the highest is the best, is not always the case. 2048 by 2048 for what I'm doing here is just fine for this texture map. Because maybe later on I may want to take this texture map and convert it into a poly paint. So this is a couple things to keep in mind. This is why they have the map size. So it all depends what you're really doing. Basically, I stick with 2048 by 2048, and it seems to work pretty good. I've never really had to get too high, but I never make things too complex, but just some basic stuff. Now there might be a time that you may need extremely large map size. You may be exporting this out to another application that requires larger maps and may look better. Like I said, it all depends. Another thing is, when you're setting up your UVs and before you get too crazy and you decide that you're going to be using this in another application, you may set up your UVs, take it over to your other application, and see how everything is looking before you get too far ahead of yourself, because you'll end up doing a bunch of work and come to find out it's not working as you expected. As you recalled earlier, I was using the UV master, showing you how this checker pattern is nice and uniform and kind of evenly spaced out. And you're probably saying, well, you said that's how it's supposed to look, and that's the correct way. But when you came over here and you started selecting the UV tiles and PUV tiles, GUV tiles, and AV tiles, it looked a little messed up. Well, the reason why is the computer, or this application, it understands this type of mapping, but visually to a human's eye, we don't understand it. And another thing is, I don't normally set up my UV sets here with a texture already on. I usually start with something new, then we start texture, and that's why it looks a little messed up. So in other words, they highly recommend the PUV tiles here, and I'll just give you a demonstration, just a quick walkthrough applying this. If we have a mesh with some subdivision levels, we come up to geometry and we would set it down to the lowest subdivision level. And we're going to create a map of 2048 by 2048. This is called the power of 2 when you have a map width and height the same. This is highly recommended. You'll get a lot better look with your height and width being the same. Then we're going to come down here and we're going to press the PUV tiles and select it, and there's our new PUVs. Of course, I would not use that texture. I would use something else. So basically I would just come down here and press new. Now I could switch my color up if I want to change it to everything to a kind of a green here. So we'll press new texture, and there's our 2048 by 2048. Then when I use the projection master on here, everything should go to plan and work as normal. As a demonstration, I'll just do a quick one right here. Just to show you the mapping is good. And we'll do one right here on the forehead. And it's done. And a good thing to always check is when this is about ready to finish up, and look at your circle here that I drew out here, and it didn't shift when it finished. And sometimes every now and then you'll see something shift, and you may need to rethinking about remapping this because something is not applying right. So basically what I'm saying is, once you press this projection master and you click something, alright, and I turn my, you may not see it in the video. So basically when I press this projection master again, this should look exactly like I see it right here, and the texture not shifting to the left or to the right or anywhere. So we'll press this again, and we're going to keep an eye on it to make everything sure it's not shifting. And you basically can tell because it'll just look the same, but I'm in 3D mode here. So basically this is turns on and off the texture here. And we can select here and add a texture if we want to. And the clone texture is very important, because when I have a texture here, we have no texture in here, and we may need to clone this. That way when we bring it back in, then it's up here. And we can go to the texture and we can export that out if we need that. We went new from texture a couple times, so we know what that is. This creates a new texture. And fixed texture seam is, remember where the seam was at, was on the back of the head here. That's fixing the seam area there where the polygons were not connecting when I morphed it. We have the transparent for texture. Anything that's black will be transparent. So if I select here, you can see all the black there now is transparent. And we got the anti-alias right here, alias. Basically it finds the two different colors and it kind of smooths them out, kind of blurs them together a little bit better. We got new from Polypaint. Well, we have no Polypaint on, so let's do a quick one here, and we'll go into the subtool. Make sure the poly paint is on. There's a little paintbrush here. Let's paint with a little bit of color. Nose that and give it some red here. Just press solo so we don't see the eyes, and turn off the color or the texture here for right now. And we'll press new from Polypaint. And there's our new texture here. And once again, if we want to increase the size here, we can jump that back up here. Press 2048. And we're going to press this again. As we can see here, it's 1024 by 1024. New from Polypaint. And we get our new 2048 by 2048. I will skip over this new from masking. It doesn't seem to be working as I expect it to be, so I will not be able to show you that. It's probably just a little bug. And we have a new from UV map right here. As you can see now, it's got a gradient map. This is kind of indicates and shows you where the seam is at. Turn off local here. It's kind of a little bit of a utility, so we can kind of see where the seam's at. And we got this one here, new from UV check. This is kind of like another utility, so if we select here, it'll indicate red areas for maybe some overlapping. What else we can do with this is pretty cool, is we turn on the polyframe here, and let's close up some of this stuff here. We'll turn the geometry down. As you can see, we got the polyframe on, and we'll come down here and press it again. And we get this wireframe that's already embedded in the texture, no matter what color I got here. So if I switch it to this one here, and there's our new map right here. These are just kind of utilities, and same way with this one, do from vertex order and do from poly orders. Just nothing but a visual way of looking at something to see any problem areas. Let's look at the wireframe, and let's turn off the wireframe here. Now we've got the embedded color in the wireframe, and we'll just morph that so we can just kind of take a look at that. And I'll press frame right here, and you can see we got the embedded color of the wireframe without having to turn it on. I'll just turn it on so we can see on and off, and we'll bring this back, and we'll frame that back up. If you have subtools like this eye here, you'll have to set up some UVs for them also. And just kind of an overview here. If you're kind of new and you kind of hear this UV, AUV, a lot of this stuff here, basically you don't have to come in here and know everything. As long as you know the basic 1, 2, 3 steps, you can come back at a later time and mess with this. Some of these settings in here I hardly even touch, so it's not that, to me, it's not that important to rush in here and try to learn this part of this area. All we need to know is some of the basic 1, 2, 3 steps. Is one, if we have UVs, this will allow us to paint on a 2D image here, so we know that's important. Step number 2 is have a fairly decent amount of map size right here, so that was kind of important. And we knew this PUV tile was another way that we could set up the UVs for this, which was really quick. Didn't have to go through none of the settings down here. Then we created a new texture, and that was one way, and the other way was through the plugin, which was through the UV master. And this was another easy step 1, 2, 3 to get through it real quick, or 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it takes to get through it. And if we decide that we don't want to paint on a 2D image and we don't have no UVs, let's say we'll delete these right here. We could probably paint this by going to the subtools and making sure this little paintbrush icon's on, and we'll turn off Z here and RGB for colors, and we don't need no texture to apply some color to this. May it be this color, or may it be applying some kind of a texture on there and doing it like this. I'll just do one more here. This was just another way of doing things. So that's fairly easy to understand, even if you don't understand a lot of this. Like I said, you don't have to come in here and rush and learn about everything, because like I said, some of these settings I hardly even use. Basically the ones I use, I just went over them with you just right now.